Good to see you again. This is ARIRANG News, live from our studio in Seoul. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung. We begin with the remarks made by the U.S. Secretary of Defense nominee Ashton Carter. At his confirmation hearing on Wednesday in Washington, he vowed to use all necessary means to defend the U.S. against threats from North Korea. He also talked about the escalating tensions in Ukraine. Connie Lee has our top story.
U.S. Defense Secretary nominee Ashton Carter has vowed to use a full range of capabilities to protect the U.S. against North Korea. This includes deploying more ground-based missile interceptors in California and Alaska, regions that could be reached by North Korea's ballistic missiles. Carter's remarks came in his written answer to the Senate Armed Services Committee for his confirmation hearing on Wednesday. He added that North Korea's ballistic missile and weapons of mass destruction are a serious and direct threat to U.S. forces in the Asia-Pacific region and to regional allies and partners. And to further protect against and respond to threats from Pyongyang, Carter said he will build up missile defense capabilities and strengthen relations with South Korea. And besides North Korea, Carter talked about the escalating tensions in Ukraine, saying he is inclined to send lethal weapons to Kiev to help Ukrainian troops fight pro-Russian rebels.
I think we need to support the Ukrainians in defending themselves.
He also emphasized the importance of pressuring Russia through other means.
The economic and political pressure on Russia has to remain the main center of gravity of our effort at pushing back. And the Europeans are critical to that. So European solidarity and NATO solidarity are critical in this regard.
Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
And contrary to North Korea's recent statement that it will no longer talk with the U.S., Washington says the door to dialogue is still open. A senior U.S. official also says the regime can change not through a drastic revolution, but through peaceful means. For this report, here's ARIRANG News' Hwang Sung-hee.
North Korea's transformation does not necessarily have to come through a regime change. That's according to U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Daniel Russell at a press conference in Washington on Wednesday. Referring to the transformation in Myanmar's economy, Russell said the opportunities that have opened and the scope of international cooperation has not come at the cost of a revolution. President Obama's remark in a YouTube interview last month fueled speculation that Washington is seeking a regime change in Pyongyang.
And it is very hard to sustain that kind of brutal authoritarian regime in this modern world. Over time, you will see a regime like this collapse.
Russell said he does not take seriously North Korea's latest declaration that it will no longer talk with the U.S. The North has often opted in and out of dialogue, making it difficult to take any single pronouncement as the last word. Russell reiterated that Washington is willing to hold talks with Pyongyang, but only when the regime is ready to demonstrate its sincerity towards denuclearization. At a separate conference in Washington, Chief U.S. Nuclear Envoy Sung Kim said that the U.S. is looking for an opportunity for serious talks with North Korea, but is also working towards stronger sanctions with the international community. The comments come amid reports that the two longtime foes attempted to arrange a secret meeting last week. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
In the meantime, North Korea has slammed the recent remark made by Marzuki Darusman, the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in North Korea. On Pyongyang's state-run Korean Central News Agency Wednesday, North Korea's Foreign Ministry spokesman said Darusman's words were a grave insult to its supreme leadership. In an interview with the Associated Press earlier in the week, Darusman said some 100,000 political prisoners in North Korea could be released immediately if the Kim Jong-un regime was replaced with a new leadership. The spokesman also said Washington was writing scripts for North Korean defectors to generate false accusations against Pyongyang on the international stage, adding that the regime will verify all testimony given by the defectors. In other news, tensions between Jordan and the Islamic State militant group are escalating. Jordan has warned of a, quote, earth-shaking retaliation against the extremist group after its horrific killing of a Jordanian pilot this week. For more, here's our Kim In-ji.
The brutal execution of a Jordanian pilot has united the Middle East in anger and condemnation. Some Muslim clerics, even those with close ties to jihadists, called the murder despicable. Other prominent religious figures demanded that the extremists be put to death, crucified, or have their arms and legs cut off. All this comes after the release of a video showing pilot Muath al-Kasasbeh being burned alive inside a cage. Middle Eastern nations, including Syria and Israel, were also quick to condemn the horrific killing. Iran's foreign ministry denounced the execution as inhumane and un-Islamic, while the Arab League Secretary General said the killing was beyond belief.
What we have witnessed about the brutal, savage way of killing Lieutenant Muath al-Kasasbeh is beyond belief. It is a barbaric act which should be condemned by everyone in the world.
Jordan has vowed an escalated fight against Islamic State, with King Abdullah pledging to wage a relentless war against the group to protect their faith, values, and human principles. After the video's release, Jordan swiftly hanged 2 Iraqi jihadists on death row, including Sajida al-Rishawi, the woman the militant group had demanded in a prisoner swap. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
And now on to the latest on the TransAsia Airways plane crash. Recovery efforts are still underway, of course, a day after a passenger jet crash landed into a river in Taipei. Now, the death toll is climbing. As of now, at least 31 are confirmed dead. A dozen people are still missing. Connie Kim has the latest.
Recovery operations are in full swing at the site of the TransAsia plane crash in Taipei, Taiwan, that has left at least 31 people dead. Dramatic video footage captured by a car dashboard camera shows the ATR-72 clipping a bridge shortly after takeoff and crashing into Keelung River. There were 58 people on board. After the Kinmen Islands-bound flight plunged into the water, 15 people were pulled out of the plane, and rescue workers are searching the recovered fuselage and in the waters for the remaining 12 passengers. Most of the passengers on board were Chinese, and China is communicating with Taiwanese officials to provide the latest information to the victims' families. The city of Xianmen, just off the coast of Kinmen Islands, where the plane was headed, is also gearing up to support relatives of passengers.
As soon as the entry permit is issued, we will fly the family members there. We are hoping to take them over by Thursday morning.
Aviation officials said the flight from Taipei Songshan Airport lost contact just minutes after takeoff, and they're still searching for clues to what caused the crash. Local media reporting the pilot's final words from the cockpit saying, "Mayday, Mayday, engine flame out." Officials are studying the aircraft's black box flight data recorders for clues. The crash of TransAsia flight ATR-72 was the airline's second fatal accident in 7 months, raising questions about the company's safety standards. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
A heated debate between the ruling and opposition parties over how to finance the nation's welfare programs continues. The two sides have the same goal, but the way they intend to reach that target are different. ARIRANG News' Lee Ji-yoon explains in this next report.
More welfare without tax hikes, a promise that once sounded too good to be true, is now stirring up debate between the two rival parties. When President Park Geun-hye took office, she promised to expand welfare without increasing taxes by cutting down on unnecessary projects and plugging tax loopholes. However, the recent hike in cigarette prices and revised income tax codes resulted in public criticism that such policies were hurting ordinary salaried workers. Both parties agree that providing more welfare without increasing taxes just won't work, but the two differ on how to fix the problem. The ruling Saenuri Party is calling for a new welfare system that works for Korea, The ruling party's chief policymaker Won Yu-chul says the government needs to reconsider the provision of free school lunches and free childcare programs. He also said instead of increasing taxes, the government should try to provide necessary welfare according to the tax it collects. The party's new floor leader, Yoo Seung-min, however, says increasing taxes is not out of the picture yet, and the party should discuss ways to provide at least some free welfare programs. The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy thinks the problem lies with the tax system itself, not on expanded welfare. The main opposition's floor leader, Woo Young-gun, said Parliament should set up a special committee to revise the current tax system. The party also believes that various tax benefits for the rich and the president's pro-business policies are what's causing the country's widened social polarization and the ballooning household debt. With a little more than a year left until the general elections, the two rival camps are under pressure to find a way to appease an angry public that's criticizing the government for squeezing money out of average wage earners. Lee Ji-yoon, ARIRANG News.
And there may be a good reason why politicians are having that heated debate. A new report from the OECD says Korea spends the least amount of its GDP on social welfare, putting it at the bottom of the list. Song Ji-sun has this report.
Korea's welfare spending is the lowest in the OECD. The country ranks dead last at 28th out of the 28 OECD countries surveyed last year. The index presents welfare spending as a percentage of GDP, taking into account spending on taxes, pensions, and health and social insurance. Korea's welfare spending was just over 10% of GDP in 2014, less than half of the OECD average. That's just a third of the spending of European countries that topped the list. 6 OECD member nations without 2014 data were excluded from the analysis. Separate data from 2013 shows that the tax burden on Koreans was 24% of GDP, which is also well below the OECD average and just around half that of major European countries. Korea's social welfare spending has hovered at the bottom of the OECD for the past 2 decades. The reports indicate that Koreans are paying less for social welfare and are thus receiving fewer welfare benefits than the countries surveyed. Economists say that Koreans need to pay more taxes to ensure they have a strong social safety net, especially with the combination of slowing growth, a low birth rate, and a rapidly aging population that is sure to lean on the welfare system as they grow older. Song Ji-sun, ARIRANG News.
The economic slowdown in Europe is taking a toll on Korea's trade with the Eurozone countries. Korea swung from a surplus to a deficit shortly after the free trade deal with the EU took effect in 2011. Our Shin Se-min reports.
A $10.2 billion US deficit. That's how much Korea was down from trading with EU nations last year. Korea's exports to the world's single largest economic bloc reached over $50 billion, while its exports topped $60 billion. The deficit trend began after the Korea-EU Free Trade Pact was signed in 2011. The following year, Korea suffered the first deficit in 15 years in its trade with Europe, with a shortfall of $970 million. And it rose to $7.3 billion in 2013. The reversal in trend is attributed to the fragile European economy. The situation was so desperate that the European Central Bank recently decided to pump $68 billion every month into the economy to prevent it from completely grinding to a halt. On the plus side, lower tariffs meant a surge in European exports to Korea. Sales of German cars in Korea, for example, jumped nearly 30% last year alone.
Imports of German cars, European furniture, and medicine soared, and with the recent sanctions against Iran, many Korean importers turned to EU for crude oil.
Although most Korean exporters suffered from a slow economy in Europe, shipbuilders were the hardest hit. Korean shipyards saw their deliveries to Europe tumble 50% from $12 billion in 2011 to $6 billion last year.
While overall demand is suppressed, Chinese and Japanese shipbuilders have offered cheaper prices to snatch orders from their Korean rivals, taking advantage of the Korean currency's appreciation.
He added that the trend of slow exports to the Eurozone is likely to continue, at least in the foreseeable future. Experts say that although the gaping trade shortfall is largely due to chronic economic slump in Europe, Korean companies will have to step up efforts to make their products more attractive to European consumers in terms of price, quality, and branding. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
The world's biggest tech firms are betting on the future of the so-called smart home. That's a living space where every gadget is connected to the internet. And many tech companies who find the smart home industry out of their wheelhouse, they are acquiring related startup companies to get into the game. Son Jung-in has this next report.
Intel Corporation, the world's largest semiconductor chip maker, has joined the competition for leadership of the fast-growing smart home market with its recent purchase of Lantic, a company that specializes in broadband access and home networking technologies. With a $280 million purchase, Intel is trying to strengthen its connected home and Internet of Things businesses, and it's not alone. It joins global IT companies like Samsung Electronics, Google, and Apple, which are already racing to get a piece of the action. The smart home market is worth over $48 billion as of last year and is expected to reach over $111 billion by the year 2019, with an annual average growth rate of nearly 20%. Korean tech giant Samsung Electronics closed deals in August for smart home device maker SmartThings and QuietSide LLC, a home automation startup and the air conditioner distribution company based in the U.S. Apple CEO Tim Cook said last year that the company had invested in 24 startups related to the smart home business in the past couple years. Google, the world's largest search engine, is also in the game. It bought a few startup companies that specialize in home automation to get a leg up on the fast-moving market. With other European IT companies rushing to enter the promising industry as well, it's only a matter of time before more devices inside the home are connected to each other. Son Jung-in, ARIRANG News.
A Dodge Caravan spotted 50 kilometers from San Francisco is raising suspicions that Apple may be developing an autonomous car. A CBS affiliate reports that that vehicle is leased to Apple. The website that posted images of the minivan said it looked like Google's self-driving car, but without the Google logo. The placement of the roof cameras is different from the ones used for mapping shops and streets as they face toward the vehicle. Now, Apple didn't comment on the vehicle in question or on whether it's developing driverless cars, but the rumor has the markets thrilled. On the NASDAQ, Apple shares rose to a record high of $120.50 at one point during midday trading on Wednesday and closed nearly 0.8% up from the day before.
Bringing you the fresh updates from stories breaking in Korea and abroad. We give you a bigger and better picture of the world. Join Laah Hyun-kyung live from Seoul. Every weekday, only on ARIRANG.
There's nothing that can match a mother's love. It has no limits when it comes to the well-being of her kids. Now, our Im Yoon-hee introduces us to a landmark play starring veteran actress Son Suk called Mother. Take a look.
A mother's love. There's nothing quite like it. Whether you're right or wrong, good or bad, she's always there to scold you, but also to pick you up when you fall. For the past 15 years, the story of this mother has been told on stage. Her heartbreaks and her trials, all her pains and her joys felt through her cries. Played by veteran actress Son Suk, Mother flashes back to the tragedies experienced by this lone mother in this landmark, heartfelt performance.
Even though I performed this for 15 years, every time it's for a new audience, so for me it's also a new performance. I think about my mother's life and the mothers of our generation and what they had to go through. Sometimes a man would have to leave his family, and although it's not the exact same situation, I think those burdens and pains are similar.
The past can haunt the present, But for this stage, the past and present sit in such close quarters, it's hard to distinguish where one ends and where one begins. This stage serves as a portal, flashing back and forth through time, taking the characters with it. This mother revisits her struggles, a time when she had to endure waves of hardships and toils. Her present form tries to comfort her past self, a time when she was uneducated, alone, and confused. Those agonies felt just as sharply as when they were first incurred. The doors open between the past and the present, inviting in memories, whether they're welcome or not.
Time is dismantled, the setting is dismantled, and the people are displaced, making this a postmodern performance. The window was made to be like a reflective surface. One side is the present, your current life, while the other side is the afterlife, filled with history, which comes in the form of memories and sometimes traumatic events. This window is meant to be a source of reflection.
The ending of a story doesn't always have to be a happy one. Sometimes closure is enough. There are no limits on her love, both in space and in time. She's a protector, a provider, a lover. Her name is Mother. Im Yoon-hee, ARIRANG News.
A very heartwarming play there. In other news, a new hobby is trending here in Korea, and that's coloring books. But these aren't your run-of-the-mill coloring books for small kids. They are for grown-ups. Our Kwon So-ah reports on what's behind the popularity of these books.
Who says coloring is just for kids? These days, grown-ups are picking up their own coloring pencils as a trend that started in Europe has arrived in Korea. Now here's a bestseller that doesn't require any reading, just coloring. Secret Garden was published in August last year in Korea after its original release in 2013 in the UK.
While the fun factor remains the same as it did years ago, there's a little more substance behind coloring books for grown-ups.
It's mostly quoted as having an anti-stress effect, as coloring is commonly used for therapy.
Coloring books tend to make me more patient and calm. That's why I buy a number of them each year.
Publishing companies were quick to respond to the popularity, realizing the positive psychological effects.
Coloring books is like getting away from the busy life, so although it takes some time, I think this is the best method to relieve stress.
Around 100 different coloring books have appeared on shelves in Korea in a span of just 5 months. Most of them from abroad. But not this one. Minhwa Coloring Wish Book. It's made by folk art artist Ho Gong-im. Minhwa is a Korean art genre known as the art of the common people from the 17th to 19th century.
I made the book since Korean traditional elements cannot be found in Western coloring books. I aim to sell my copyrights abroad too.
Saw also stresses that her book is unlike other coloring books that have been made through computer graphics, as she drew her illustrations herself with a brush. Despite the high demand, there are limits to the healing effects. As experts say, coloring by yourself just satisfies a temporary sense of accomplishment. A book may not replace your therapist, but fans of the new trend say it does add an extra splash of color to their everyday lives. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
Welcome back. I'm Michelle Park here with the latest weather forecast. Today we have a cold wind blowing, making it feel less like spring. The temperature in Seoul has made it up above freezing, but the wind chill is at -3 degrees and it's expected to drop more throughout today, so make sure to bundle up when you're heading outside. Now we still have this high levels of fine dust continuing on from yesterday, and as you can see here, the levels are high all across the nation, especially over in Gyeonggi-do province, where levels are high and Seoul are 3 times higher than the normal. Now, if it weren't for the mix of fog and dust, it would have been a brighter day because we are currently having a clear skies with just a few clouds here and there. Now, with that in mind, let's take a look at the readings for today. Seoul will peak up to 5 this afternoon, meanwhile the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan will top to 4 and 8 degrees. And moving over to other regions such as Jeju Island gets up to 6, Dokdo hits down to 2, while Gyeongan drops down to -6 degrees. Well, that's all for now, Michelle Park, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
And that's ARIRANG News for now. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung in Seoul. I'll be back with all of that and more at 6 p.m. Korea time.